You're lying in bed. Your partner is asleep next to you. The door is closed. The room is dark. No one can see you. No one can hear you. You are completely, utterly alone. That feeling, that specific, quiet ownership of yourself, you assume is just a feature of being human. It isn't. For roughly 1,000 years from the fall of Rome to the first glimmers of the Renaissance, almost no one in Europe had it. Not the peasant, not the merchant. Not for most of that period, even the king. The open hall of a medieval manor housed 40 people sleeping in one room. The peasant longhouse kept the family at one end and the livestock at the other, separated by nothing but a low partition and the smell. There were no separate bedrooms. There was no such thing as a closed door until the 14th century, and even then, only in the homes of the very wealthy. So how did medieval people have privacy? The answer is not what you think, and it will make you look at your locked front door very differently. Let's start with the physical reality, because it was more extreme than most people imagine. Historian Matthew Johnson, in his 1993 study of medieval English domestic architecture, documented that the defining feature of the medieval home, at every level of society below the nobility, was the open hall. One large undivided room, no corridors, no separate spaces. The hall was where you ate, where you received guests, where you settled disputes, where you slept, and where you died. Everyone who lived in the household, family, servants, apprentices, lodgers, shared this space, not in shifts, simultaneously. Eamon Duffy, in The Stripping of the Altars, his 1992 study of English parish life, describes communities so physically interwoven that the concept of a private self, a self with an interior life that no one else could access, was essentially a medieval invention in progress, not yet complete. You were your role. Your role was performed in public, constantly, in front of witnesses who depended on you and judged you. Your reputation was not a social asset, it was your identity. So when we ask how medieval people had privacy, we're actually asking a more interesting question. How did people who were never alone manage to have selves at all? The first answer is architecture, but not the architecture you'd expect. Medieval people did not build walls to create privacy, they built furniture. The bed curtains of a medieval household are not decorative. They are the closest thing the medieval world had to a private room. When you pulled those curtains around your bed, you created, for the first and often only time in your day, a space no one else could see into. The bed was not just where you slept. It was your one legitimate claim to an interior life. In wealthy households, the canopied bed was the most expensive object in the house, sometimes worth more than the building around it. This was not vanity. It was a rational investment in the only privacy technology available. The sealed letter is the second piece of architecture. Wax seals on correspondence weren't primarily about security from enemies. They were about privacy between two people who had no other way to speak without being overheard. The proliferation of sealed private letters among the merchant class in the 13th and 14th centuries, documented in collections like the Sealy Papers and the Paston Letters, tracks almost exactly with the emergence of something historians now call the medieval private self. People begin writing things down that they would never say aloud in a hall. Confessions of doubt, admissions of desire, complaints about specific people named in ink on paper. The sealed letter was the first private conversation in European history. But the most important privacy technology medieval Europe produced was not a piece of furniture, and it was not made of wax. It was a room. In 1215, the Fourth Lateran Council, called by Pope Innocent III, issued a decree that changed the inner life of Europe. Canon 21. Every Christian was now required to confess privately to a priest at least once a year. Before 1215, confession was public. You stood before your community and named your sins. The community witnessed your shame. The community witnessed your penance. There was no interior life that wasn't, at some point, someone else's business. After 1215, for the first time in European history, there was a legally protected space where one person could tell another person something no one else was permitted to hear. The priest who broke the seal of confession faced permanent deposition from office. The penitent who was exposed faced legal remedy through church courts. This was not spiritual comfort, it was a legal architecture. The first legally protected private space in the history of Western civilization was built inside a religion, enforced by canon law. and it was designed specifically to receive the things a person could not say in a hall. Historian Thomas Tentler, in Sin and Confession on the Eve of the Reformation, 1977, argues that the confessional created something entirely new in European psychology. The notion that a person had an interior that was categorically their own, not their families, not their lords, not the church's, except in this one ritualized, bounded, legally sealed transaction. The confessional did not free people from surveillance. It created the concept of something worth surveilling. The private self didn't exist before someone built a room specifically to protect it. But here's the complication, and this is the part that should make you uncomfortable. Medieval privacy was not about withholding yourself from others. It was about being known correctly. Chris Dyer, in Standards of Living in the Later Middle Ages, 1989, documents something striking about English village communities. Most peasants lived and died within 10 miles of where they were born. Your neighbors knew every significant event of your life. They knew who your parents were, what your father owed, which priest had baptized you, which fields you'd failed to maintain, which woman you'd argued with at the well. There was no escaping into anonymity. There was no moving to a city where no one knew your name. Privacy in this world couldn't mean concealment from the community. It meant something more precise and more demanding. It meant that certain things seen by everyone were not spoken. Not because they were secret, because speaking them would violate the social contract that made communal life possible. The conduct manuals of the 14th and 15th centuries are explicit about this. The Baby's Book, a late 15th century English courtesy manual, instructs young men not to stare at what they are not meant to see, not to repeat what they have accidentally overheard, and not to ask questions whose answers would embarrass the person being asked. This is not politeness. This is the operating system of a world without walls. Privacy was a collective performance. Everyone agreed simultaneously and without negotiation to not notice certain things. Not because they hadn't noticed, because noticing aloud destroyed the social fabric that kept everyone alive. This is a more sophisticated concept of privacy than the one you're using right now. Your concept of privacy is architectural and legal. You have a door, the door has a lock. Behind the lock, you are legally protected from intrusion. Your communications are encrypted. Your medical records are sealed. Your browser history belongs technically to you. Privacy, for you, is a system of walls, physical, legal, digital, between your interior life and everyone else. And inside all those walls, you are profoundly, structurally alone. A medieval English village of 200 people produced individuals who knew each other's debts, witnessed each other's grief, shared each other's bodies of warmth and necessity, and still managed, through a shared agreement about what to see and what to leave unseen, to preserve something that functioned as an interior life. Not because the walls kept people out, because the social agreement let something private exist inside a space that was, by every physical measure, entirely public. We dismantled that agreement when we built the walls. We told ourselves the walls were the solution. We stopped practicing the skill of knowing someone's shame and choosing not to name it. We stopped building communities where your neighbor's vulnerability was something you protected rather than something you documented and distributed. We replaced the social contract with the terms and conditions. We replaced deliberate collective blindness with infinite, anonymous, searchable records. We built the walls and lost the agreement, and now we have neither. Medieval people had privacy without walls. They had an interior life without architecture. They built out of social obligation and genuine interdependence a set of invisible agreements about what could be seen and what had to be left alone. Then the private bedroom arrived. Then the sealed house. Then the private inbox, the private profile, the private account. And we handed all of it voluntarily to systems that have no obligation to look away. They had no walls and kept more secrets than we do. We built every wall imaginable and called it privacy. Then we gave the keys to everyone.